She reached a point where she did not feel safe, where she had endured months of repeated efforts to get her to change her mind.
Jane Philpott, we're almost out of time here. Before I let you go,
I hope Canadians will want to know the truth. I think that's what they are saying to me.
Hi friends, welcome back to Lee TV. I'm Lee Harding. This video is about politics and integrity. I've often said that our institutions are only as good as the people that are in them. And there's something here in what Raybould and Philpott have done that is an example. And I found it interesting listening to the tape where she's talking integrity, she's talking principle, and to him, he's only thinking of it in terms of the obstacle that is in her mind for getting the Prime Minister's agenda moving forward.
And SNC and so on. I wanted to pass on where the PM's at. So there's a lot of like another rising anxiety, as you can imagine, about signature firm and job loss and all that coming after the Oshawa thing and what's going on in Calgary and whatnot. So the PM wants to be able to say that he has tried everything he can, within a legitimate toolbox to try to head that off. So he's quite determined, quite firm, that he wants to know why the DPA route, which Parliament provided for, isn't being used. And I think he's going to find a way to get it done one way or another. So he's in that kind of mood, and I wanted you to be aware of that. So if he's thinking about bringing in somebody like Bev McLaughlin to give him advice on this, or to give you advice to make, if you want to feel more comfortable that you're not doing anything that's inappropriate or outside the frame of...
100% confident I'm doing nothing inappropriate.
Yeah. No, but would not be if you decided to use some of these tools under the law. Because I think he feels the government has to have done everything it can before we lose 9,000 jobs in a signature Canadian firm.
I'm confident in where I'm at, and my views on SNC and the DPA haven't changed. This is a constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence that, Michael, I have to say, including this conversation, previous conversations that I've had with the Prime Minister and many other people around it, it's entirely inappropriate, and it is political interference. I'm surprised that you and I are having this conversation, but I'm just saying that I really feel uncomfortable and about the appropriateness of this conversation.
Okay, I understand that, but I think his view is he's not asking you to do anything appropriate or to interfere. He's asking you to use all of the tools that you lawfully have at your disposal.
I know I have a tool under the Prosecution Act that I can use. I do not believe it is appropriate to use it in this case.
Okay. All right. Then that's clear. He's in a very firm mood about this. So
does he understand the gravity of what this potentially could mean? This is not just about saving jobs. This is about interfering with one of our fundamental institutions. This is like breaching a constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence. So we can.
I don't think he sees it as that.
Well, then nobody's explaining that to him, Michael.
Well, I don't. I'm going to have to report back on before he leaves. He's in a pretty firm frame of mind about this, though. So I'm a bit worried.
Bit worried about what?
Well, it's not a good idea for the Prime Minister and his Attorney General to be at loggerheads.
Well, I feel that I'm giving him my best advice, and if he doesn't accept that advice, then it's his prerogative to do what he wants. But I am trying to protect the Prime Minister from political interference, or perceived or otherwise.
Well, I understand that, but mean, he doesn't have the power to do what he wants. All the tools are in your hands. So.
Okay, so then, I'm having like thoughts of like the Saturday night massacre here, Michael, like, to be honest with you. And I don't, this is not a great place for me to be in. I don't relish being in this place, but what I am confident of is that I've given the Prime Minister my best advice to protect him and to protect the constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence.
Okay. All right, but I mean, I'm worried about a collision then, because he's pretty firm about this. I mean, I just saw him a few hours ago, and this is really important to him. And okay, all right.
Okay.
Thanks for calling me.
Thanks.
For calling me back so quickly.
No problem.
And, we'll see. He's still around tomorrow. There's a number of things on the go right now. So
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I'm not under any illusion how the Prime Minister has and gets things that he wants, and I'm just stuck doing the best job that I can.
Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are no longer members of the Liberal caucus. The trust that previously existed between these two individuals and our team has been broken. Whether it's taping conversations without consent or repeatedly expressing a lack of confidence in our government and in me personally as leader, it's become clear that Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Dr. Philpott can no longer remain part of our Liberal team.
The decisions that I have made on the basis of what I believe is best for Canadians, to stand up for the truth and to stand up for the independence of the justice system. It's very unfortunate that it's come to this, but we have to make difficult choices in politics, and we aren't always in control of all of the things that will happen and happen to yourself when you're in politics, but you have to be able to hold your head high and look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and say that the choices that you made were the best ones under the circumstances.
If you stand up for what you believe is right and you hold strong to your principles, the truth and principles must always come first, and that's what I did, and that's what I'll continue to do. I recorded that tape. There's nothing illegal about it, and I said in any other circumstance it would be inappropriate. I was protecting myself. I knew that something very dangerous and wrong was going to happen, and that my job was at risk. Well, I mean, my comments about the word unconscionable wasn't directed necessarily at the Prime Minister. It's a general statement around the necessity to uphold the rule of law and the independence of the prosecutor. It's fundamental in our democracy in order to do that, in order to make decisions around pieces of public policy, to have a foundation upon which those decisions are made, is how those decisions will be sustainable.
In terms of the bar being whether something broke a law or not, when the people of Markham Stouffville elected me to come to Canada, of course they expected that we would uphold the rule of law, but they also expected that I would go beyond that, that I would be ethical, that I would uphold the very structures by which our democracy is built. And one of the pieces of those structures is that the justice system is independent of partisanship, it's independent of the executive and legislative branch of how our country is put together, and that I also wouldn't support a crossing of ethical boundaries. So to say that it's good enough if something hasn't broken a law is a very, very low bar to hold. And I would hope that all politicians would say that we would also not cross ethical boundaries. I have received some treatment which I think is less than respectful from former colleagues and lots of folks on social media and elsewhere, and that, that's not what this story is about. I can deal with critique, but it takes a certain measure of courage to step up and do something that is going to upset others. But I believe so strongly in the importance of us as a country having a justice system that we can trust, to know that decisions are not going to be made in the courts based on whether the person or the company on trial is friends with or associated with a particular politician who will plead their case. That's the fundamental issue here. I think Canadians can be very thankful that that the system did work. I believe it worked because the former Attorney General did not bend to the wishes of those who wanted her to interfere in the trial. The decision around this particular trial, the SNC-Lavalin case, it's been described by some as the largest corporate corruption trial in modern Canadian history. It's not an insignificant trial in any way, and there is a person called the Director of Public Prosecutions who is completely non-political, who has a large office of people who are trained in criminal prosecutions. She made the determination that this should go to trial. There is a tool that the former Attorney General could have used if this company qualified, but the Director of Public Prosecutions said they did not qualify for that, and
but
gave
you make the point
lots of evidence as to why. We can be thankful that we did not have political interference didn't occur, but it was because the former Attorney General was not willing to meddle. The first lines that you may have heard when the story broke initially in the Globe and Mail, the first lines that very day were the allegations are entirely false. Well, we know now that they weren't entirely false. So I, of course, would not have felt comfortable having believed the former Attorney General. I did not feel comfortable going out and saying the allegations are false. The story of the government has changed now to not necessarily denying the allegations, but to saying, well, it doesn't actually matter, is I think the general tone of the messaging at the moment. And I don't believe that either, because I believe it does matter that this attempted interference took place, and it does matter. And I think Canadians deserve to know that someone takes responsibility and apologizes for what took place. I essentially couldn't go out and, to use a much-used phrase, toe the party line on this. And as a cabinet minister, I had the obligation to do that. Not members of parliament don't have to agree entirely with the government. That's in fact how the system's supposed to work. That members of parliament are free to hold the government to account, even if they are caucus members of the same party. But a cabinet minister has to be able to defend entirely and say in good conscience that they support the approach of the government. I couldn't do that because I felt that our approach was wrong.
You chose to sacrifice your political career over this.
Well, I chose the truth. I chose to act on principles that are so important to the future of our country. That's more important than my political career. I got into politics to improve people's lives, to be the very best member of parliament for Markham-Stouffville that I could possibly be, to stand up for truth, to represent what I heard from my constituents. And if that means that in some way I've been taken out of opportunities that I had before, it makes me very sad. I loved the work that I was able to do, but I have to be able to speak to my children and my mother and my husband and say I did the right thing, and to my constituents and say I did the right thing. I spoke up, and I spoke up for truth. And, if that means that I can't continue in federal politics, that will make me very sad. I don't know what my political future holds at this point. I think there may be some opportunities out there for me yet. But
so
the truth is more important than any individual's political success. Honorable members of parliament from all parties are just that. They're honorable people who have the right to be here because their constituents sent them. They are all people of integrity. People, I suppose, have different bars, different principles that to them are lines that they can't cross. For me, this was something that I could not defend. The approach that was being taken on the SNC-Lavalin case, because I didn't support it. And I'm confronted by media every single day, putting a microphone in my face. I will never lie to the media or to the Canadian public and say something that I don't believe to be true. And for me to go out and say everything's fine, I didn't feel that was truth. From my perspective, I understand people have different perspectives, and so it just became untenable for me to be able to continue and be able to speak freely and fairly what I believe. Well, I encourage people to read her submission that she sent to the Justice Committee, a very good 43-page document, and it explains the reasons why she made that tape. But what I would say is I think it's a bit of a red herring to be talking about whether or not her justification is reasonable, and not to focus on the content of the tape. What was said in that tape, what was being attempted in that tape, was to interfere with the Attorney General, who is, in that case, she was not wearing a political hat. She was representing the independent justice system. And there were attempts to try to make her do something that she didn't believe was the right thing to do. That's a disturbing tape. Especially falling on months of similar kinds of conversations.